Salut, moi c'est Jérôme Vermelin et vous écoutez Les gens qui lisent sont plus heureux. Et si, à l'heure où les réseaux sociaux vampirisent nos cerveaux, prendre le temps d'ouvrir un livre était devenu un acte de résistance? Ce podcast, c'est celui des passionnés de lecture, sous toutes ses formes, sans préjugés. Dans cet épisode, mon invité est une légende vivante de la littérature américaine, Monsieur Bret Easton Ellis.
I read books and I'm much happier than my partner who doesn't read books. And sometimes I think the fact that he doesn't read books is part of his floundering around, his flailing, his unhappiness.
J'étais encore adolescent dans les années 90 lorsque j'ai découvert American Psycho, le roman le plus célèbre de Bret Easton Ellis, le deuxième de sa carrière seulement après les lois de l'attraction. Je me rappelle que le personnage de Patrick Bateman, le banquier serial killer, amateur de musique pop et de costumes sur mesure, m'avait autant envoûté qu'effrayé à l'époque. Avec ce livre, hyper controversé, Ellis, qui n'avait que 27 ans lorsqu'il a été publié, portait un regard visionnaire et acéré sur les dérives de l'Amérique capitaliste. De Glamorama à Suite impériale, ce Californien aussi dingue de littérature que de cinéma n'a eu de cesse de titiller la bonne conscience de son pays, avec le même mélange de violence et d'humour, de mélancolie aussi. Paru au printemps dernier, son dernier livre intitulé White n'est pas un roman, mais un essai où Bret Easton Ellis épingle le nouveau règne du politiquement correct qui gangrène d'après lui la société américaine. C'est, il faut le savoir, un prolongement du podcast qu'il a lancé aux États-Unis dès 2013. Après nous avoir rendu visite il y a quelques mois, l'écrivain est revenu faire un tour en France en cette fin septembre, invité d'honneur du salon Fnac Livre à Paris. Quelques heures avant de remettre le prix du roman Fnac 2019 à la romancière française Bérengère Cournu pour son roman De pierre et d'os, paru aux éditions Le Tripode, Bret Easton Ellis m'a accordé un entretien de 30 minutes que je vous livre sans filtre ni trucage. Bret Easton Ellis, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here in Paris because actually you've been in Paris a few months ago, right? For the promotion of White, and you come back.
I did. I came back at the behest of my publishers, and they suggested that I host, I guess, the Fnac Book Festival, which is why I'm here, and it sounded like a good idea. And also I could take care of some stuff in Brussels and in the UK. So, yeah, it was like the beginning of fall, a new season. I'd been working all summer long in Los Angeles, never left my apartment, and I thought this will be a lot of work. Lafont, my publisher, really fills up my schedule. But I don't know. Paris for a couple of days, meeting my fans. I've realized in many ways I'm much more popular here than I am in the United States.
In America, right? Really?
I would say so, yeah. I would say so.
When you came into Paris in the book was published in April in France. You talked a lot about America being stuck in a politically correct mode.
Horrible.
Is it worse since summer?
Yes.
What happened that's so worse?
That it's getting, well, look, it's getting tighter and tighter, the noose around people. And there is a fake news media that's at play that is getting worse and worse. The New York Times is getting more brazen in terms of putting out information out there that's not true. A horrible example happened last week where someone supposedly came out and said Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court justice, sexually assaulted her. Well, the girl said, I never said that. I don't remember that. That's never happened. Anyway, things like that are happening with a regularity. People are being fired for things they said 10 years ago. A comedian who was hired for Saturday Night Live was suddenly fired in the same weekend he was hired because of a comedy routine from 2 years ago. It's worse. It's much worse than it was just this past summer and into the fall. And everyone thinks, where is the breaking point? When is this going to finally stop? When is this snake going to stop eating its own tail? Now, it'll be interesting to see. I have no problem with Mr. Trudeau, who it was announced today, went to a party 19 years ago dressed as Aladdin.
They did a blackface.
If that is international news, then we should all kill ourselves. We should basically kill ourselves if this is international news. Times change, contexts change. People are not frozen in 2000. I know someone said, well, he was a school teacher. It was racist then as is racist now. No, in a different way. In a different way, it's racist, if it ever is. If it ever is to the blackface, and that's a whole other discussion. But I do think that this notion of being a child, not being an adult, is hugely popular in U.S. right now. To be a clean, spotless, sexless individual with no messiness, no adult anger, no adult feelings, be a contradictory person, think this, think that, think women are different and want different things, I don't know where it's leading us. It seems to be a lost cause. So I don't know what it's like here. I have a feeling it's happening. I have a feeling it's slowly happening here.
I think it does.
And I don't know if it's in Italy yet, but even the journalists I talk to about Italy say, oh, it's coming. It's not here yet, but we feel it coming. So I don't know, this thing that has sucked up America into this vortex of bullshit has got to be spreading out in other places. And I don't know where the pushback is.
But did it change one night and you woke up in a politically correct
years.
America, or did it change in a few weeks, months, years?
No, a couple of years. I mean, movements like this, you take notice of them, and then you chart their inevitability. And I think it began happening. Well, look, I have had problems about this since 1990. Canceled. I was canceled before cancel culture even began a thing in 1990. So I had a taste of it very early on when my publishing house decided not to publish a book of mine because certain people were offended.
We're talking American Psycho, right?
Yeah. And so I understand what that meant, decades ago. But I think, and then, it went away. That was at the height of this kind of politically correct movement that started to bloom in 1990, 91. Certainly figures like Madonna, Robert Mapplethorpe, Two Live Crew. There was a pushback on, there was the Tipper Gore wanted to put ratings on records.
With a sticker on
Right. And
so all advisory.
All this was happening, and it was like, oh, and then it stopped. And then somehow during the Obama era, there became this notion of progressivism. But the progressivism that was being pushed was actually a Puritanism. It wasn't progressive, it was Puritanism. It was saying, well, everyone is a victim, everyone needs to be shielded from the harsh realities of life, everyone is the same. And that put everything in a very different perspective. Many students believe this. They swallow this on college campuses. And so it kind of starts there. And then the culture encourages it depending on what side of the aisle that you're on. And so I first started noticing this whole shift, I think when there was all of these debates on college campuses about safe spaces, safe space, and that that kids get triggered by texts, by things, books, ideas, and they need a safe space to be protected from them. And then that moved into the way the media started to cover certain political figures, certainly the way they were writing about Trump in a way that mirrored academic, and that the media began to shift over to that view of things, looking at everything through the lens of identity politics, the lens of masculinity, toxic masculinity, whatever. And I started noticing this about 2014, 2015, and that's when, and also feeling the reverberations in Hollywood in terms of what movies people would make, and also just seeing people lose their jobs and get fired for tweets they've said, jokes they made, people they aligned themselves with, as Hollywood became increasingly corporatized and became this corporate entity. So it took some time, but it certainly took root in the Obama era, and then has come down to this kind of mishmash of ideas that I hope are being dismantled, because no one can really live under this kind of Puritanism.
But don't you think the Weinstein story speed up that change, and that now everyone, especially male, are judged on the way they treat women? They've treated women 5, 10, 20 years ago.
40 years ago, 100 years ago.
40 years ago.
1,000 years ago, yes.
Because that story is basically viewed as a huge positive change for the world, because it's pushing women to talk about things that happen to them. But would you say that it also has a bad side, and this bad side is what we see with Kavanaugh and stuff?
Everything has a bad side. Everything has a bad side. Me Too has a bad side. Of course it does. Believe all women? That's crazy. You don't believe all women over this. That's nuts. Me Too started out with the best intentions, and then it became weaponized. It became weaponized, and it became just as negative as the things it was against. And that is a real problem. There is the offline reality, offline, not online, but the offline conversation about Me Too is a joke. It's become a joke, and it's become a dangerous joke. My boyfriend grabbed my wrist 3 years ago. My boyfriend couldn't let me make a record. He's to blame. And then the media tries to Me Too that person, that man, and the man is usually a stand-in for Trump. The men, Harvey Weinstein is a stand-in for Trump. Kevin Spacey is a stand-in for Trump. Charlie Rose, Matt Lauer, all of the media celebrities who got Me Too are stand-ins for the anger that Trump got elected. And also for the fact that Trump was a quote-unquote womanizer and liked to brag about things. I doubt Me Too would have happened if Hillary Clinton had been elected. I just don't think it would have occurred to anybody because everyone would have been so happy, I suppose, that she was elected. So I think that the Harvey Weinstein thing is that, the other thing is that he was considered a dick. He was just a dick. And it will be very interesting to see if any of these charges brought against him stick. Certainly, I don't know. I guess Annabelle Sciorra is the actress who said she was raped by him, perhaps. But I don't think Asia Argento or Rose McGowan have any kind of realistic, turnout with Harvey in terms of the courts or whatever. So, and the media has swallowed the story up and turned it into something that's so much bigger than what it actually is. And I think this past week in the New York Times, with those two reporters just flat out printed a story about a woman and the sexual assault of that was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh that was simply a lie and not true, is where their agenda is. That's just the agenda. And we all...
So you're using the news and you're using stories.
I'm gay. I don't have to worry about it. I'm gay. Thank God, because otherwise, every straight man I know is terrified.
But what about Kevin Spacey? He's gay.
He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything.
He's blacklisted from Hollywood. His career is over.
That's Hollywood's problem. I don't know if it's fully over. I always believe that there is a comeback. But the other thing about Kevin Spacey is people thought he was a dick. It wasn't like he was a nice guy. But people thought he was just simply a dick. And
I met him once. And he was not really nice with people around him.
I met him once, and I thought he was really nice.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I don't think. Look, those stories, the Kevin Spacey stories, they're all bullshit. What? Really, you're a dude, and Kevin Spacey grabs your balls. You're gonna go home to your mother and cry and say your dreams died and that you can't. And also, that guy proved to be a total liar. The kid was a total liar. He made it all up. He was texting with his girlfriend. That's it. It's not Kevin Spacey is the problem. That's the problem. A society that encourages competitive victimization. Anyway, it's right now in kind of a hopeless mess. But Kevin Spacey seems to be the only one. I don't know if there are other gay men who've been Me Too'd. I think there's a different dynamic between men and men and men and women. And I think gay men have a different attitude about men and being pinched or grabbed or, told to perform oral sex on me or something. It's a different dynamic.
This summer in America, the release of a movie called The Hunt was cancelled.
Yes.
Because it was supposed to be released a few weeks after the shootings in America. And we don't even know about the quality of the film, but is it also an example of what's happening in America?
Of course it is. It was probably not a good film. Word of mouth was that it wasn't good. But I think there were so many mixed signals about that movie. I think the Trump administration got it wrong and thought that the movie shouldn't be released. But in actuality, the movie is about a bunch of rich liberal elites who go on a killing spree and they're shooting down, conservative, rural Trump voters, I guess.
So it's Democrats killing Republicans, right?
Right. And which is totally fine. That movie should be made and that movie should be released. And it's an interesting metaphor, certainly. We don't have enough of those. And so it was canceled. There's a very nervous culture. I guess the company assumed that it would encourage copycat killings, that this would be, it would start this fever and all this stuff would happen. But I don't know. I mean, that's the risk you take when you make a movie. But I do think that the cancellation of that was knee-jerk, and I think if the movie had been released, it might have been fine. But you never know. People are crazy. And there are so many shootings in America that I guess you just better be cautious and maybe just not even make those movies anymore. Why bother making it if you know what the culture is and then you're just going to yank it?
I'm curious to know what's going to happen with the release of the Joker in America. If a story like that happens, if a mass shooting happens, because I've seen the movie a few days ago, and it's basically a guy being taken as an example by poor people to get revenge on the rich. Yep. Is exploited, is mocked by society and by upper classes, and he gets to kill people, and then the people on the street want to do the same. So it's basically the same kind of, problem that could happen with that movie.
It's interesting that the majority of shooters in America are millennials, white male millennials. Often they're considered incels. Incels meaning they're drawn to doing this because they're involuntarily celibate. They don't get laid. They don't have sex. And they leave these manifestos about how much they hate women, how much women are bitches, and I'm going to take my revenge on them. The most famous one was, I forgot what his name, Elliot Rogers was his name, of San Diego. He was one who started this. And he wrote like a 300-page manifesto that really is the incels' war and peace, what they refer to all the time. I don't know, outside of that, I guess we have to create art that doesn't bother people in some way or doesn't risk that. It's a terrible thing to live in a free society and realize that there are people who are worried about how art is going to affect people in a negative way. I mean, what do you do? I mean, who would have thought that, and I use these examples, who would have thought that Catcher in the Rye would lead so many men to try to assassinate people, 3 or 4, I think. I mean, what are the hidden messages in Catcher in the Rye? There are so many violent video games, there's so many violent movies that don't provoke anybody into killing someone. I don't know. I mean, you have to make the movie you want to make, and you have to hope that because there are 3 or 4 people out there. I don't know, who would have thought at any mass shooting that a movie would have lured someone over into the dark side like that. I don't know. I just don't think you can live in a culture and have to think about that. But then I don't know. I've not been a victim of it. I haven't had anybody who's been a victim of it. Maybe I think differently.
Do you think a novel can have that effect on the world these days? Do you think a novel, a book of fiction, can set the world on fire anymore?
Oh, well, okay, let's go back and ask, did it ever really? I mean, I guess more so. It did more so, but wasn't reading always a kind of somewhat niche thing? Maybe a somewhat middle class, to upper middle class thing. I don't know. Personally, I don't feel it. I don't feel that anymore. I don't feel that reading is at the center of the culture, or that reading is at the center of even the culture of the intelligentsia, that it's been pushed off to the side. Now, that's not to say that The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt doesn't sell 3 million copies. It has. That's something. That comes along very, very, very rarely now, a book like that, a literary book. Or some say it's not a literary book. But even a first-time writer in our country, there's a young Native American writer named Tommy Orange, who had a book called They're There, that sold, I think, 500,000 copies. You know, certainly there are these books that happen and people are buying them. I do think what we're talking about is the adult literary novel. And in the country I live in, America, sales for that kind of book have gone down 13% since 2013. So 13% drop in sales for that kind of book, the book I'm interested in. And also, by the way, that 13% drop equals about $1 billion in revenue wiped away. That is a terrible business. That is a terrible part of the business that's going down, that people would much rather watch a miniseries, sit down at night and watch a miniseries than crack open a book and get themselves involved in that active experience of reading the book. I don't know. I was trained to read novels. I enjoy it. I started reading one this morning. I started reading two this morning. So I am a happy reader, and I fall into reading. And a book is good, it comes along, it's great. It is no longer among my friends, my family, a lot of people I know, something they do.
Do you think we have to encourage people to read? Again, or it's a lost cause?
I don't know how you do it. I mean, how do you... I mean, my boyfriend plays video games. These video games are long format narratives. He is a character in it.
You play with him sometimes?
I don't play with him, no. My video game days were Space Invaders and Pac-Man. I mean, we're talking about the 80s, late 70s. I haven't played video games since the early 90s. But I think that for him, that narrative and of controlling it, of being a character in a narrative that he is in, that takes place over sometimes 24, 36, 42 hours, that's a novel. That's his version of the novel.
I understand.
And when I hear him talk to his millennial friends, they'll say, "Oh, did you play Red Riding 14 or whatever it is, the new video game that came out on Friday?" "Oh yeah, I played it. It was excellent. The drawings were good. They did the best voiceover work. I definitely preferred it to this one." They talk about it like their movies or their content that how we used to talk about books or how we used to talk about films. And that's fine. That's just the way it is. I do know that when my boyfriend actually reads a novel and he's in one of those moods twice a year to pick up a novel, he loves it. He loves it. He loves it. He said there's nothing that compares to reading. He read Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann. For some reason, it was on my shelf. He picked it up. 5 days immersed in it. Could not stop putting it down and loved it. So, I don't know.
Is it also one of the reasons why you haven't written a novel in a long time?
Oh, I don't know. It could be. I think about that. I see a correlation, perhaps. I always wanted to make movies, which I haven't done, and I'm 55. But I always thought by my mid-30s, I was going to be directing because that was always the plan. But I was also a writer, and I was writing novels. And suddenly, one novel was published and was successful, and that was Less Than Zero. And then I realized, well, I want to write this book about my college years. And then I moved to New York and I wrote a book about New York, American Psycho. And then I really got ambitious and I really was in love with the novel. The novel was the message. Everyone was going to read my new novel. And I spent 8 years on a novel called Glamorama, which really very few people read and was not the kind of book that I thought was going to change the culture. I thought this was going to be the ultimate statement on something, my most ambitious book. And
it's a great book that still works for today's world and today's world of fashion. There's no Instagram inside, but it's almost the same.
So anyway, and then I wrote Lunar Park, and then but I was always, even after Lunar Park, I was trying to get these movies made, and then finally I did get the money to make a movie out of one of my books, The Informers, which did not turn out so well. But it was a very long process, a very costly process, and out of that misery came a book called Imperial Bedrooms. And then really from then on, it was trying to get TV shows made, movies made for these 10 years, the 10 years between Imperial Bedrooms and White. And I am working on a book for, well, I might be, I don't know. I might be writing something. I can't say anything about it now. But I just, what you're really asking is there a correlation between the attention people put on books and my pleasure of writing them? I always got a great deal of attention on my books whenever I published them. It didn't always mean they sold that well. A lot of attention but didn't necessarily mean sales. But I don't know if that really. I felt like I had 5 or 6 books that I always wanted to write, and I wrote those books, and then it was time to move on. I never saw myself as someone who was going to write 15 novels or 18 novels. I always thought 6 or 7, and that's a lot.
Like every guest on my show, you have to answer the question: do you think people who read books are happier than others?
Well, I think happy is overrated. I don't know how good what happy is. I mean, happiness is, I don't know what it means. I'm going to say today, no. I'm going to say that that's not true. I'm going to say that people who actually do read books are happier. I know that, for example, that I read books and I'm much happier than my partner who doesn't read books. And sometimes I think the fact that he doesn't read books is part of his floundering around, his flailing, his unhappiness, because I do think books, first of all, settle you, force you to concentrate. It's an active experience, and they give you empathy. You're in someone else's shoes. I'm reading right now, which I don't know why I've never read, James Baldwin, Another Country. And I've never read this book before. And I just read the part of the first chapter today, which is about like a young jazz musician in New York in the late 50s. And it's just amazing to be put in this character's shoes. And it is like a virtual reality thing because I'm seeing the nightclub, I'm seeing the New York streets, I'm seeing the parties goes to. I have to create it myself. It's not already created like the worlds my boyfriend goes into. And by doing that, I get a tremendous amount of empathy for this character and for what his life might have been like and why he's so unhappy and what's he going to do to fix it. So I don't know. That makes me happy. What does my boyfriend have when he gets up? Final Fantasy 14? I mean, I don't know. Would that make me happy? I don't think so.
Your boyfriend, you criticize him so much.
Oh, I love him. I love him. And he knows it, and I don't criticize
Tell me something nice about him.
He's funny. He's funny as hell. The funniest person I know. And he's a very good sport. And I don't know. There's just something about him where it has worked for us for 10 years. And I don't know why. Longer than any relationship I've had. A very wide age range in ages, but he's also kind of an old soul, and I don't know. It just works. Though sometimes it doesn't work. And again, we got into a fight the night before I left for Paris. Actually,
oh, really?
We got into a fight.
So do you text all day to catch things up? And
no. Last night we texted back and forth briefly, but the time difference is so strange. I'm asleep, he's up, then I'm whatever. And the fighting was something that I thought we had completely stopped doing, and that was about politics. And there was something on. I guess I left LA on Tuesday. This was a Monday night, and I was packing, and we had a TV on in one room and a TV on in the other. And he said, "Turn that off. I don't want to hear that man's voice." And it was Donald Trump giving a rally in New Mexico. It was just on my television. It was in my office. I was getting my papers together. I wasn't even watching it. And I walked in and said, "What is wrong with you? What is your problem?" He said, "I can't deal with it." I almost shook him and I said, "You're going to have to deal with him. You're going to have to deal with him. He's not going away. So just pull up your pants and deal with it." And that leads to more screaming and whatever. And then we calmed down and went to bed.
Come on, he's leaving next year, Trump, right?
You know what? People thought he had no chance of winning in 2016.
It's true.
So, and the news lies. The polls are all bullshit. So I don't know. Who are we to listen to? I mean,
we have fake news. We have fake polls also.
Fake polls, fake news. So I don't know. My guess is yes. He will. And maybe not easily, and maybe not even the popular vote. Though I'm not so sure now. I'm not so sure. I think there's a good chance because of who he's up against.
Yeah, because it's a very exciting thing to imagine who's gonna fight him during the campaign. Which one will the Democrats choose?
Well, I tell you, the only one that I thought that could hurt Trump was Marianne Williamson. Because she's an attractive woman. And Trump responds to that. And he can't fight an attractive woman, and he doesn't want to fight an attractive woman. And if Marianne Williamson was on stage, I think there would be part of him that would be reticent about going after her. Elizabeth Warren, he'll decimate her. He'll decimate her. And she'll probably be it. Kamala Harris, he'll decimate her. And Joe Biden, he'll kill. And, you know, everyone said that Hillary Clinton won her debates and everything. Trump won all those debates because he just doesn't give a shit. And he's also not this quote-unquote policymaker or bureaucrat. He's not a politician. And what they did not learn, what the left, what the Democrats did not learn in the last election is that things are different now. And you cannot be a policy wonk like Elizabeth Warren is. Have your numbers, have your figures, have your little plan, and make it work for you and win an election. I think we're in a very, very different stage in that you're going to need someone with personality.
You need to be a character.
A character, and you need someone who has the kind of quote-unquote transparency that Trump traffics in, which is, I'm not being honest, I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that it doesn't lie, but he's got this transparent kind of realness, this no bullshit thing that I think people like. We'll see what happens. There is no way to get an accurate temperature in the American media. It's completely 95% biased, so no one knows really what the reality is. There's a book that was just recently written about this, about how when people are polled about Trump, they mostly lie because they don't want to get into it with who they're talking to, and they just say, no, I'm not, when in fact they are. So we'll see. I mean, I was at dinner last night with Mirwa, the music producer, and another girl, and a young French actress who lives in LA. And all of them think that Trump will win, and that it's just excruciating that we have to go through this pantomime, this theater of the absurd for a year and a half to get to November of 2020. And then what's going to happen to the other side? They're already nuts. They've already lost their mind. How bad is it going to get then?
Can you tell me about your podcast, Brett? You've been doing it since 2013.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy it a lot?
Yes,
do you think
I wouldn't do
it. It's something that you love more than you expected?
Yes, and also I have to make it clear, everyone has a podcast. You and I have a podcast. I have a dozen friends who have podcasts that we've never heard of. I got into podcasting before I even knew what a podcast was. I had been asked many times on Twitter by the podcaster Mark Maron, who is very popular in the United States, and he kept tweeting at me and saying, Brett, come on the podcast, come on the podcast. And I never tweeted back because I would say, what's a podcast? What the hell is a podcast? I don't want to go on a podcast. And then I got called into a podcast corporation who was hiring people to record podcasts. And I said to my agent, what's a podcast? And he said, well, we'll find out. I like the idea that I could have as long as I want to just talk about whatever I want, and I wouldn't have to put it in an article, and I could explain myself in a way that I couldn't with my tweets, which got me into so much trouble. And so we started doing it, and we were at Podcast One. Now I am subscription only. I'm at the Bret Easton Ellis podcast at Patreon. But it's not a lot. I mean, it's like, it's $2 a podcast. They're usually fairly long, about sometimes 2 hours, 45 minutes, 3 hours. And every podcast, I have about a 35 to 40 minute essay. I read about culture, about what's going on in my life. And if you like me, I think it's worth it. And also when you pay that $2, you get 90 hours of back podcasts. So it's not a bad deal. But I know people hate the idea of paying for podcasts, but too bad. I think more people will be paying for podcasts. And I do like it. It is a way for me to, it really was a way for me to talk about movies, about films. And since film culture is really dying in the U.S., I'm kind of moving away from that. And I've started a series of going back to certain years of movies and talking about those years. Recently I did 1979. And then I think in a week or two, I'm going to post my feelings about 1978. And then I just finished writing one about 1980. And I think I'm just going to continue that way because unless American movies get a lot more interesting this fall, I don't know what I'm going to be talking about.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, Brett.
Thank you.
And I hope next time we talk, it's about a book, it's about a novel.
I hope so too.
Thank you very much.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Bye. C'est la fin de ce podcast. Merci de l'avoir suivi. Je vous dis à bientôt pour un nouvel épisode des gens qui lisent sont plus heureux.